Welcome to the Freak Show podcast, hosted by Sam Thurmond and Jacqueline Steele Thurmond. Sam is an Air Force Academy graduate and veteran who, after his service and 2 deployments, escaped the 9-to-5 grind by building a real estate investing business that has, to date, accounted for over $50 million in real estate transactions. Jacqueline is an award-winning musician, former owner of boutique branding agency Steele International, real estate investor, and designer for luxury multi-million-dollar homes.
We are so excited to welcome you to the Freak Show podcast, where we center our content around the frequency of belief.
Why? Because when we overcome fear and self-doubt, basically by getting out of our own way, we can make the impossible possible.
And in this podcast, we are going to share our favorite mindset tools and life lessons that have completely transformed our lives and businesses. So without further ado, let's get freaky.
All right. Welcome back to the Freak Show. I'm Sam Thurmond. I'm here with my wife, Jacqueline Thurmond.
Hello.
How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Doing awesome.
I'm super pumped for this episode. Truly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am too. I feel like it was a little frantic putting these together, coming off a trip.
Busy month.
And yeah, a lot going on. I feel like we always say that it's been busy, but it always is. So, yeah. But we got it done. We're in here and we got some good stuff to talk about.
Yeah. And we switched up the format a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So this episode is titled Where There's a Will, There's a Why. And
why is that?
Why is that? Well, because it always comes back to your why, or it needs to always come back to your why. And, I would say a lot of people have probably heard of Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, and understand that concept as you're defining your why is basically what is guiding your ship at all times. Mm-hmm. And when the seas are rough, it's super important to have that why. It kind of keeps you on track.
Yeah. I'm laughing because the seas have been a little rough recently.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were just laughing at me like I was rambling or something.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So this episode, we want to explain what our why is. And I think we've been developing that over time. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a unique why, because I think it's this, a lot of people have the same why as we do. But what I do think is unique and what I do think people will find interesting is how we view it, mm-hmm. and how we're looking at it. Mm-hmm. And because that's really the important thing, is going a layer deeper and defining our why in a way that kind of paints a picture for us every time we run into challenges or adversity, or, you want to give up or whatever it is. You can just picture that why and it'll snap you out of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't leave you with any options, mm-hmm. basically.
Yeah. I think it was Danielle Laporte who said, dream like an eagle, but plan like a mouse. And I think that aerial perspective, that taking a step back and viewing things in their fullness rather than just the picture you have right now, mm-hmm. is really helpful for gaining a healthy perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you're only seeing what's in front of your nose, you're just not seeing the full picture. And a lot of mm-hmm. times it can feel like you don't have options, yeah. or yeah. you can't even see the blessings around you because all mm-hmm. you're seeing is the door that's closed right in front of you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that perspective is extremely important. And so like you're saying, I think the why brings you back to that perspective.
Very much.
Yeah.
The big picture perspective.
Yeah.
It's like the perspective of looking at one day in time or a full year in time.
Right.
You may have a couple bad days, but a couple bad days don't constitute a bad year.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And you want to make decisions based on that broad perspective, mm-hmm. Versus the immediate, which is hard to do so many times because, you're under pressure or you got to pay the bills or whatever it is. And it just seems, it's just hard. So at any rate, that's why we're talking about that today. And to jump right into it, one of the biggest life hacks we found is just making life not about yourself, right? It's easy to settle or give up or just not do your best when it's really only you banking on the outcome. And when you can make your life about someone else, a community, or just other people in general, or other things, or other aspirations that are outside of yourself, it just makes life easier, because it makes decision making easier. It takes the pressure off of you, and life isn't so self-centered, and gives you so much more purpose.
Yeah. I think I have an alternate perspective on that too, because there is a perspective in which this could seem self-centered or selfish when you're focusing on yourself. But I think knowing you and knowing me, we both have a tendency to self-sacrifice.
Sure.
And to take on additional responsibility, or to take on additional money responsibility even for other people, because we go, oh, well, we can handle it, or we can do it, or we have the means, or we have the emotional maturity to take these things on. And you and I have a tendency to pile on ourselves. And I think what our why has taught us is the family comes first. And if I'm taking on too much, or you're taking on too much, or we're not speaking up for ourselves or standing up for ourselves, whether that's in business or in family relationships or any kind of relationship, we are damaging the family unit.
Right.
And it may not seem like a direct hit, but it ends up being a direct hit, whether we mean for it to be or not. And so I think the season that we're in right now, I talked about there being some rough waters. It is teaching us the deep and profound lesson of why our why is so important, and just how deep it goes through business levels, through personal levels, through soul levels.
Yeah. So kind of to summarize what you're saying is, we have a tendency to sacrifice, or we have a tendency to err on the side of taking more responsibility than we necessarily should, whether that's
very much,
in a business and taking on extra responsibility to, do even menial tasks, or take the financial hit in a situation, or whatever it is. We have had a tendency, and that's been a big learning curve for us in business, to have
individually and together.
Yeah, to have that boundary. And what you're saying is because of our why, going back to our why, it's easier to recognize those moments,
so much easier
to basically set that boundary, or stand up and say no, or put our foot down and say, no, you're not going to take advantage of us in this situation, whether or not somebody's actually trying to take advantage of us, but, put our foot down and say no, because this is going to hurt our family. This is not just me sacrificing me, it's me sacrificing taking food off the proverbial table for my family.
100%. And I just saw a reel with Brene Brown, and she was talking about the different options that families have for where their focus goes. So families can be parent focused.
I saw that.
Yeah. Where I think I sent it to you, where the focus goes on the parents and the parents' careers and what the parents want to do. And then there are family units where it's child focused, where the focus goes on, the kids and their extracurricular activities and soccer practice and blah, blah, blah. And then more rarely, there are family focused families where the focus goes on the health of the family. And so everything is taken into consideration. And maybe the parent doesn't take on writing a book during that season, or maybe the kid doesn't take on 2 different sports camps. They take on one, and the health of the family is put at the forefront.
Yeah.
And I think that's another just really healthy way of viewing things. Like, we can't be everything to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
And there's a season for everything. And I think having a very clear understanding of your why helps create clarity around all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the family collective versus any individual in the family. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was good. I thought that was really good. So I think, we have, our son is our why, we'll say, or our family is our why. But as it relates to our son, again, not an uncommon why for a lot of people, for your children to be your why. But I think before having children, never fully understood that. Like, I understood making it about someone other than yourself, or that being a parent does that. But to break it down even more specifically with our son being our why, we view it as 20 years from now, when our son is out in the world and he is forging his path, he is taking hits, he's doing whatever he chooses to do. He can turn and look at his parents and see people who were brave enough to go take risks, to take some beatings, to forge on, and he can have that reassurance that he is not a fool to follow his dreams, to follow his passions, to not play it safe, to not follow the
proverbial path, or the American dream
that most people do. But I mean, if he chooses to do that, that's totally fine. But I think having an example in his parents, in the people who care about him most, the flesh and the blood that he is derived from, to be able to connect that to himself as he comes from
strength,
the ilk of people who forge through,
have big nuts and big boobs.
Exactly.
Excuse
That's
my language,
our why.
but yeah.
But to be able to do that we feel like is such a powerful gift to give him, because now it's in his DNA. And I think what can happen is, if you don't have that example in your life, or you don't come from that sort of
entrepreneurial spirit,
that
written, you have to have a certain level of comfort with risk.
Yeah. If you don't come from that, and that's not your family makeup, now you're the first one to do it. Yeah. Now you're the one that's
breaking chains.
Yeah, you're the kind of the one that's going out on the ledge, and everybody's kind of looking at you sideways as it doesn't understand what you're doing, or so forth and so on. But for him to be able to look at us and see that this is his makeup, like this is what he can do. And it doesn't have to be business. It's whatever it is,
Well, and I think our job as parents, to simplify this, is to create really nutrient-dense soil for him to grow in. And I think all of our parents did the absolute best that they could. So I'm not going to call anybody out.
No, I'm not knocking our parents whatsoever.
No, and I know you're not, but I think it's really important to say this, is that in creating nutrient-dense soil for your child to grow, there has to be a healthy dose of dreaming in that, and understanding that dreams are possible. And then also a healthy dose of reality.
Yeah.
Which is, you also have to work to create those dreams. But they are possible, and anything is possible. And I think when you and I joined together, and when we decided to join together business-wise, we had no idea the challenges that we would face. And good thing, because we probably wouldn't have
Right.
taken this path had we known the challenges that we would incur.
Yeah.
But what we want to do is lead by example and show him that despite challenges, we can, through mindset, through action, through getting information, through continuing to take steps forward, we can still forge a path ahead. And I think where we have seen through observation, whoever maybe stop or quit or give up or say, this just isn't worth it, we are going, no, it is worth it. And we
Yeah.
don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what it's going to look like at the end of this month, which is in a few days, right? But we are expecting that it is going to be more wonderful than we could imagine.
Right.
And so I think creating nutrient-dense soil for our son is allowing him to dream, teaching him how to work on those dreams, and then also giving him tools to have a mindset with the strength of, let's say, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like you think of his physical strength throughout his life, like that's the kind of mindset we want to impart on our child.
Well, make it the norm. You know
Make
what I mean?
it the norm.
Make it normalize adversity as just a part of life. And I think
Because
that's
it
what's,
is.
and that what seems as though is lacking so much is that adversity has been, I won't say removed, because I know plenty of people, everybody hits adversity at some point in their life. But
You're not living if you don't hit adversity sometimes.
yeah, but it seems like we are so averse to adversity
Yeah.
as a society at this point that it really leaves people stagnant. But that's beside the point. I think making that the norm for him, and when he is making it normal to not only accept that, but expect it and be grateful for it, because that means that you're growing. So, you know, and that whole path. But it's not only that is our gift to him, right? Like we're not going to give up on that we want that for him, or we want to be that example for him. But then the flip side of that is, what does that do for us?
Yeah.
Selfishly, which is just as cool, is it removes the option.
Yeah. It's like nitrous
giving up.
oxide.
Right. We talk about this all the time. Burning clean energy, endless, bottomless energy, having that source. And what this why does for us is it removes the option of giving up. It removes the option of ultimate, failure. Just not going to happen, because we're not giving ourselves that option, because we are going to be that example for him.
Yeah. And the mind pattern of defeat, which is so dangerous. And it's something that I have struggled with, of just like, oh, I feel so defeated.
Yeah.
But when you have a clear why, when it is much bigger than yourself, when those thoughts start to creep in, it is easier to correct them as they creep in, because you realize that defeat is not an option.
Right. It's not an option. And we have had countless sleepless nights. We've had periods that were gut-wrenching in the sense of, financial burden or loss, or just weight that was feeling like it was crushing us. And it felt like that because we hadn't experienced it before. And now looking back 10, 5, even 2 years ago,
I'm
some
thinking
of that adversity.
this year, I mean, we've experienced so much loss.
I know, but
just
what I'm
this
saying
year.
is looking back, it's not as big, but in the moment it felt crushing.
Monumental.
And so going through that and choosing to chart that path where you're going to face that, it takes a toll on you over time. Like, it will wear you down.
If you let it.
If you let it. But the key is having something to fall back on that makes that all worthwhile. And that is the why. And so now in those seemingly crushing moments, or when that weight feels so heavy, to just be able to step back and say, what, you're just going to go through it. Like you just have to go through it. You don't have another option because you're not going to quit. You're not going to give up, and you're just going to figure it out. It just removing that option makes everything so much easier.
It does.
If you just don't have the option to quit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think thankfully now we have more tools in our toolkits, and this is this is an excavator, as our son would say. This is a big tool. We have others, and I think we've learned to manage the stress and whatnot over time. But the bigger steps you take, the bigger risks you take, that you kind of have that cyclical feeling of you face the same sort of fears. They're just kind of bigger. But yeah, so that's our why. We want our son as an adult to be able to look at us as an example, as inspiration. Maybe he wants to go a completely traditional route, and that would be totally fine. But at least he knows that he has the ability.
He has the support, and he's got role models within his circle that are going to buoy him forward, but also have the experience and the stories to share with him.
Right.
And I think 2 points that I'd like to touch on. I don't know when we're wrapping, but 2 points that I'd like to touch on before we wrap up. One is something that Tony Robbins talks about, and I don't think he was talking directly about a why, but in this case, if you don't have a why already and you're listening to this, you have two options. It can be love-based or it can be fear-based. Every human emotion can either be derived from love or fear. And your why could be because you want to prove your dad wrong, or you want to prove your mom wrong, or you want to prove so-and-so wrong. Or your why can be based on fulfilling your potential, or because you want to be an example to your kid, or you want to be an example to your little brother or sister, or whatever. If you can, fear can be a great motivator. And if you can alchemize it, awesome. But if you can, I would encourage you to have your why be based in love, because love takes a lot of the pressure off. And I know for me, when I'm starting a race feeling like I'm wearing 200 pounds of pressure, it's a lot harder for me to get motivated to get going. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would add is adversity on its face value, it sucks. It's really hard. But adversity is a teacher. And something that I've learned through loss, through fear, and when I say fear, guys, I'm talking about just vulnerably crippling fear. Fear that has kept me in bed during the day, fear that has kept me awake at night, fear that has haunted me for months at a time. It doesn't have to be like that, because it's pointing us towards something. That adversity that creates that fear really is just a portal, and it's asking us to alchemize it. And I'll give you an example. I am someone who takes health extremely seriously, sometimes far too seriously. I've been far too regimented at times. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, when there was so much stress and we were moving and getting into an RV to travel for months, and there was a lot of instability there. And what I've realized over the last 4 years of having this dis-ease, I'm not going to call it a disease, it's just dis-ease, is that it is a portal constantly asking me to alchemize it. It's constantly a fear that bubbles up that is asking me to create love around it. And I find that literally my thyroid results reflect either self-criticism or self-love. When I am in a place of anxiety and I'm being hard on myself, my thyroid numbers literally reflect that. When I am in a good mental space and I am monitoring my thoughts and loving myself and taking care of myself the way someone who loves themselves does, my thyroid numbers reflect it. Mm-hmm. It's incredible how much our thoughts affect our physical selves. And so bringing that all back to where there is a will, there is a why. Our thoughts create our reality. Our thoughts create the energy that we live with, and the energy that we live with literally creates frequency. We call this the freak show. Mm-hmm. And that frequency attracts or repels other frequencies. And so if we can master our thoughts, we can master the creation of our reality. Mm-hmm. And again, it really does start with why. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have I have a couple questions for the audience to help them kind of get to their why, because I think that's a struggle for a lot of people. But like you're saying, your why is the goalpost when it comes to managing your thoughts. And it's a tool in that process because it cuts through so much of the noise. Mm-hmm. I think that's what your why does, is it cuts through so much of that noise and gets you back to your purpose. And people that live a purpose-filled life tend to
literally live longer,
have a more joyous experience and accomplish more, so forth and so on. So I'm going to wrap up the episode, if you're ready.
Yep.
With a few questions. Sorry, back to clearing my throat. That could help listeners get to their why. So if you're struggling with your why and what that would be for you, I would just ask you, what would you sacrifice anything for? What's the one thing in your life that is so worth it that it removes the option of quitting? If you can answer that, you're probably getting close to your why. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening, and we cannot wait to connect with you next week. As a friendly reminder, if you are enjoying these podcast episodes, we would love it if you would leave us a review on Spotify or Apple. It helps with the algorithm to get this podcast and the information within it out to more people. And we read every single review. So if you would leave us a review, and we would just appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to The Freak Show with Sam Thurmond and me, Jaclyn Steele Thurmond. We would love to connect with you via our website, beckonliving.com, and on social media.
You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Beckon Living, and you can join our email list to receive uplifting messages, podcast and business updates, and discounts on high-frequency products just for our freaky community.
Cheers to high-frequency living.